Bruce is coming, right? Who is coming this morning? Can you give me the time? Happy Father's Day, everyone. My name is Kevin Bates, and welcome to Church Online. If you want to find out more about us, go to resonatechristian.church. There you can give, look at our schedule, you can find out who we are, and you can listen to some of our archived material. Well, since it's Father's Day today, and I'm going to be addressing men and the idea of masculinity. So this message is for everyone. We have something to learn. All of us do, and we're going to be in Mark 10, starting in verse 35 through 45, approximately. So, and bouncing around a little bit. I want to start with a question, and I want the question to actually sit with us a little bit. We're not looking for easy answers because the idea and the topic of masculinity is not an easy topic. And instead of just reaching for an easy answer, just sit with the question a little bit. The question is this: what is a man for? What is a man for? So just sit with that question, kind of maybe just answer it a little bit in your head, maybe ponder the question, what is a man for? And don't answer it. The question is not what does a man do? The question is not what a man is supposed to look like. The question is not what a man sounds like or what he's supposed to bench in a weight room, right? Or squat in a weight room. And the question is, what is a man for? And what's the purpose underneath all of the performative action? What is the purpose underneath their performance? I ask this question because I don't think most of us were ever told that answer. To the question. None of us were really asked that question. We were handed scripts. Maybe that script was to be tough, not to cry, maybe to provide, be the breadwinner, and to win. And no one really sat us down and had a discussion of what the point of life was and what the point of being a man was. And so we improvised. I'm 53 and I've improvised most of my life. Some of us improvised well. A lot of us are still trying to figure it out in our 40s and 50s. And whether you're watching this from your car or whether you're watching this from your couch, listening just halfway while you're making breakfast or coffee or lunch or whatever, just for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to answer this question and try my best to navigate through this topic of masculinity. We are living through what a lot of people like sociologists and economists, people that are pastors and just dads in general, we are living through what's called a crisis of masculinity. And usually it's talked about at a certain angle. And I'm going to take a completely different approach because I've been inspired lately to listen to some speakers and authors about masculinity that it doesn't fall in the same camp as what we're used to on media and social media and stuff and what we're hearing lately. The reality is this, and we need to just steep in this reality a little bit. Young men are falling behind. Young men are falling behind, and this goes across all socioeconomics and all race, that yet young men are falling behind in school, falling behind and out of the workforce, falling into isolation, falling into screens, falling into anger. They have anger issues, emotional immaturity. And really, we're falling into this trap of anger equals strength, or toxic behaviors and cruelty equals power. And therefore, because we're in this trap, we're also seeing some grave consequences of suicide rates increasing, incarceration rates increasing, addiction rates increasing, and young men are falling basically into that vacuum, and some of them are receiving really toxic voices and advice and pathways forward. So I want to talk about this topic honestly, because men are, statistically in a lot of trouble. And I would say that we're in talking in this honestly, I don't want to create a lot of fear. We're not going to talk about some golden age of our future. We're not going to, because that doesn't really exist. We're going to just biblically ground ourselves in the idea of masculinity and answering this question, what is a man for? A few of you have heard me talk about a gentleman by the name of Scott Galloway. And Scott Galloway definitely has been an inspiration to me in some of his writings, and some of his podcasts and his public speaking. He's a business professor. He's a businessman and also a business professor, a writer who's basically spent the last several years sounding an alarm over some pretty grave statistics about young men. He's actually not a theologian. He's not a Christian even. He would be a self-proclaiming atheist. So he's not preaching from a pulpit. He's looking at labor data and college enrollment numbers. He's looking at loneliness statistics, mental health statistics, and such. And his diagnosis, stripped down to the core, goes something like this. For most of human history, masculinity organized itself around three functions. And the three functions are this: to protect, to provide, and to procreate. Those three functions: bringing resources home, keeping the people you love safe, and building a family into the next generation. And then, because that's just evolution and that's just our human existence, right? But then the world changed faster than the script that we were handed of how to provide, protect, and procreate. The script changed. The world changed faster than the script did, and we were not handed a new script. So physical strength, if you think about it, we don't chop wood anymore. Really, some people do. Most people don't. We turn up our thermostats. We don't chop wood. We don't look for our own food. Some do. Most just go to the grocery store. So physical strength stopped being the primary currency of providing. Protection became less about muscle strength and fighting and more about just being present. And procreation, or family formation, basically has been delayed. Our birth rates are way down. So family formation has been delayed, complicated at best, and for a growing number of young men, just abandoned altogether because they don't feel like they have anything to offer. If you look at the statistic of a 25-year-old or a person in their young 20s and how often, or if they've even been out on a date with anyone, it is staggering to see that people are retreating into literally abandoning family formation altogether and intimate relationships of all kinds. So Galloway adds a fourth idea. And the fourth idea is actually one of the most important ideas that I've heard in a long time. And he says a man needs to be a surplus value. So you can apply these really to human beings. I mean, you don't just need to apply them to men, but we're just talking about men for Father's Day and the grave statistics of where men sit. Men need to be a surplus value. That's not just self-sufficiency or survival. That's surplus, generative, right? Where we are producing more than we consume. Leaving people, leaving places, leaving environments and situations better than we found them. So a man just doesn't take. Now, I know that all of us, when we interact with society and our environment around us, we do take attention. We do have needs that we need to fulfill. But a surplus value is that we are giving more than we are taking. So taking attention, taking resources, taking validation, just doing those things in and of themselves is not a thriving life. It's not carrying out our purpose. And it really is not being masculine at all. So I think that's a good diagnosis where men in general are not being a surplus value. We're no longer providing, we're no longer protecting, we're no longer procreating, even in the generative mentorship, coaching realms and such, even in those realms too. And we're not being a surplus value. Now, that's honest. I'm not just ripping on us here as men, but that is an honest look about statistically and also culturally, sociologically, and financially where we are as a society. That is not what masculinity looks like. We need to start being a surplus value. I do think, though, that because Scott Galloway only takes it so far, and he does respect religion, but he doesn't actually add any type of spiritual or Christian nuance to the discussion, I do think it's a little bit incomplete, where I do believe in those principles, but I believe 2,000 years ago that Jesus talked about this same exact issue and gave an honest look about what it means to be a human being, to be a man as well, long before spreadsheets and college enrollment statistics existed. So read with me Mark 10. It's going to be up on our screen here today. Jesus, basically his disciples, the people he was with, were walking towards Jerusalem, walking towards the final hours. And so though the disciples didn't know that yet, they were just walking alongside of him and walking towards this town. And James and John pull Jesus aside and basically start jockeying for seats in the kingdom. They wanted the best seats in the arena, right? They wanted the status. They wanted to be seen as great. And so the other 10 disciples here, they're furious about it. And they're upset that this jockeying is going on. And not because the request was wrong, but because they also wanted good seats in the arena too, right, in the kingdom. And so we have this room full of men positioning themselves for the best seats in the house. And I would say that sounds like every corporate boardroom that I've ever sat in, or any type of meeting that I've ever sat in that's dominated by men. And Jesus then doesn't necessarily scold them for wanting greatness. He redefines it. And this is what he says. You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the first must be a slave for all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, I chose that translation because of that last phrase, a ransom for many. A ransom is something that's paid. A ransom is something that's given beyond capability but of human reasoning. And so Jesus, in that sentence, says, I am a surplus value. I want you also to be a surplus value as well. He doesn't say, don't be great. He actually says, in order to be great, greatness is real, right? He wants us to look at something different. He wants us to see greatness as something that is the opposite of every empire that has ever existed. He wants us to see the opposite of locker room talk. He wants us to see the opposite of the comment sections on some of the social media threads that I see every time something's posted. You have ultimate fodder of cruelty by men, just downplaying and attacking other people. It's awful, right? So greatness is service. It's authority poured out, not hoarded. It is giving our life as a ransom. So you think about Jesus in the New Testament, and he secures his legacy basically not by domination, not by kingship, but he basically gives a legacy by giving his life away. And that's our anchor today. I think about Jesus as Jesus giving his life away ultimately on the cross. And I think, okay, how can I follow that? How can I follow Jesus into that cross-like behavior in my life? And so when I look at these ideas that Scott Galloway produces, or not produces, but articulates, he says provision, protection, procreation, being a surplus value. I say yes to all four of those. That's ultimately what masculinity is. It's not some brute dominance, I have authority over you type of thing. And if we would filter those ideas through the power of Christ and the service of others, I think that that is great. And that is the greatness that we can attain as men. And that's the legacy that we can leave for others and generations to come. Let's look at those four ideas. The first three, though, are provision, protection, and procreation. Providing isn't primarily a paycheck. That's part of it, and paychecks do matter, and I'm not going to spiritualize away the real pressures of finances and putting food on the table that we all carry. Biblically, though, provision is broader than money. Provision is basically a dependable presence to the people around you, a family that can build their life around the presence of a person. And so focusing on men, a man who provides finances and food on the table, but is never present for the people around them, hasn't actually provided much that will last. And so Paul actually writes that a man who doesn't provide for his own household has actually denied the faith. And so the word here that Paul uses isn't narrowly wages, that a man is not just to provide wages, that provision has to do with showing up and being present and showing care and love and the act of love in a family's life. And that provision becomes very tangible, physical touch, and I can see that person showing up in my life. So I think about the times that I have provided financially and that I have provided with my presence. And I think, showing up for our kids, but also showing up for our spouses, where when life gets too much and is overwhelming, maybe my job in that overwhelm is to carry, as Jesus would say, or the Bible would say, to carry the burden, that we walk alongside our family and the people that we, even our chosen family, that we are carrying each other's burdens and showing up and providing that relief of stress load. But then I see protection. So provision and protection. Real protection really has nothing to do with the biggest guy in the room. What we deal with today is attacks on our families and our friends around us, almost invisible attacks, where I look at our elderly being attacked through scams and through internet, basically fraud. And I'm wondering, men, are we stepping up, learning, getting resources to help our elderly parents and those that are around us, protecting them from enemies that are coming into our household through online services and fake services, trying to scam our elderly? Are we protecting in such a way? Are we protecting our kids from just what they're being introduced to via the internet, where through gaming and through basically people that are strangers becoming friends, or not friends, but these online connections that our young people are making? Are we protecting them using devices, protection devices, to protect our families from intruders, from people, literally physical enemies, trying to even traffic our kids? It's horrible what we're dealing with today. Has nothing to do with swinging an axe, has nothing to do with guns, has nothing to do with our brawn, has everything to do with our intellect and our ability to be just aware and having conversations with the people around us, with the people in the room. How about absorbing the cost? Protection is about absorbing costs, where we absorb standing between family and harm, where we're absorbing the cost, the staying up late, the waking up early, to picking up and straightening up and figuring things out, and you're writing the email and you're taking the hit and you're taking the anger, instead of your family standing in between people that want to mock us and want to shame us. We're standing and protecting our wife's dignity or our family's dignity by just standing in the way of people that are making fun. I mean, how about protecting our family from what some of our leaders are doing to our women? Some of our leaders are speaking so toxically about women. Are we willing to stand up and speak something different, even if it's just in our households, in front of our spouses, our wives, and in front of our daughters? Are we willing to speak something different than, "Hey, piggy"? Are we going to say something different than, "Hey, piggy"? Are we going to stand up and protect and to show up and say something different than what's being spoken at a national level? I think that we need to stand up. That has nothing to do with our bodies. That has everything to do with protecting our wives and our daughters' hearts, and speaking something of equality, speaking something of women's strength, speaking something of women's rights. Yes, that might be uncomfortable. That might stand in the face of maybe some things that we might sound different than our friends. We might be, I guess, might be seen as some liberal or some progressive or some name that you want to call yourself, or whatever. But are we willing to stand up even to other men in our lives, even to other men that come into our homes, even to other men, when even our dads, even the uncles, even the cousins, even the brothers, and even the friends that speak something completely toxic or agree with something completely? So are we willing to stand up and say something different, and to stand up and to say, "Shut up," to people that are willing to speak toxic, I guess, toxic things to our family and our friends? Wow, I just went off there, because I think that just spoke to me, just speaking that out loud. I have two daughters at home, and I think about my two daughters, and I think about all the things that have been said about women, and all the counter things that I've had to say for women. And I think, why are we living in this era that we're having to just fight so hard for, and continue to fight for, women's equality? This should be the norm. Women's equality should be the norm. Women's strength and power should be the norm. This goes to the people that are outside of our core families. These are our chosen families and our friends as well. Are we willing to protect all people around us, and to stand up and to protect their hearts against the toxic words and the speak that is happening around us? Okay, let's move on to procreate, even though I could probably spend the next 10 years on protection. Let's talk about procreate, because I don't think that this has only to do with biological children, although biological children are beautiful. It's a beautiful calling. Adopted children are beautiful. It's a beautiful calling. Foster children are beautiful. It's a beautiful calling. And I think procreation, in a bigger sense, though, is pouring your life into the next generation. So whoever that is that you're choosing to do that with, and I hope that your children are a part of that, that's a beautiful thing as well. And so some of you do that as uncles, and some of you do that as coaches and mentors and youth leaders and chosen dads and such. And the question isn't, did I reproduce? The question is this: did I leave someone behind who is more whole because I was in their life? Did I invest in another person enough that I am giving enough, that I am generative to in my life to another person for their life and their future? So those are the three, almost like just Homo sapien human pillars, I would say: provision, protection, procreation. That is what a man is for. I see those in the Bible. I see those all through the Old and the New Testament. And something to add then that I want to sit with longer is surplus value. Surplus value is the truest test, I think, of a man's character. Are you a net contributor to the people in the room, or are you a net drain? And that's a really difficult question to answer, and almost could become hurtful even to enter into that discussion, because surplus value isn't about achievement or status. Think about wealth building. Are you trying to build wealth right now for yourself, or are you trying to build wealth for just that next generation? Are you trying to add just a little bit more, give the leg up to the kids or the next generation? So surplus value isn't about achievement or status. Plenty of high achieving men absolutely leave the room worse. They absolutely leave the room more anxious and more competitive and more afraid, and they're the wealthiest person in the room. I just experienced that this last week, where I don't meet very many billionaires, but I met a billionaire, and I was looking at the interaction and how things were playing out, and I went, wow, I probably don't want to spend more than 10 minutes with this person in the room. That is a difficult environment that they are creating. That is not a surplus value. There's more anxiety, there's more issues to deal with when that person leaves the room. So a surplus value is, did a man's presence, talking about men, make people more able to be themselves? Were you able to be more yourself because that person was in the room? And I think that Jesus is the model here. He didn't just have power. He gave away that power. He healed and told people to go live their lives. He fed 5,000 people and didn't ask for any credit. His name didn't have to be on anything. He just lived his life. That's a man operating in surplus value. So here's where I get a little bit irritated with men in our society, and it's really difficult for me to get into conversations with people that absorb or buy into just a cultural, not biblical, but a cultural idea or a cultural scam of what masculinity is supposed to look like. And that cultural scam is this: masculinity is on the same plane as cruelty. That masculinity means that someone has to be under you, that you are brawn and you're all of these things with words and attitude and downplaying and making fun of others, right? And that's a level of cruelty. There's actually no such thing as toxic masculinity. It is masculinity and cruelty. When we say there's toxic masculinity, that means that masculinity is like in this spectrum where at some point I run the risk in this masculinity like spectrum, this paradigm, I'm all of a sudden moving into, oh, this is where it's somewhere in here is where it gets toxic. No, this is masculinity. Masculinity has a very godly, has a very social and cultural definition: provision, protection, procreation, and surplus value. investing in others, loving your neighbor, and lifting up those and helping those that are marginalized to rise. That's masculinity. Anything that's not that is basic cruelty when it comes to the toxic side of things. So here's where I need to say something very direct, because I think a lot of men have heard a version of this that I think we need to correct. There's a narrative out there, and you've heard it all. Everyone has heard it. Maybe you've even said it, and I want to help us correct it, that masculinity is under attack. So you've heard that before, and usually LGBTQ plus people are like the enemy with this conversation, right? So masculinity is under attack, and LGBTQ men in particular are responsible for softening, destroying what it means to be a man. That's somehow making it plain. If a gay man exists and are visible and not ashamed and present in the room, something is being taken from a straight man. And I want to say this really clear, and I want to get this straight. That's absolutely not true. And that's not even a Christian idea. Your masculinity is not based on this other person that is in the room. That's a fear-based idea just dressed in a biblical costume to me, where you're actually saying that because this people exist, that you can't exist in your fullest form or something. I don't get that. Masculinity was never under the threat of somebody else's from somebody else's existence. And if your sense of manhood and your sense of masculinity depends on someone else being smaller, quieter, hidden in the closet, more ashamed than you, right? That was never strength and masculinity to begin with. That's just power over, and that's insecurity in a deeper voice. That's what that is. So making it a little more plain is, if your masculinity and manhood depends on somebody else being pushed down, whether it be a gay man or whether it be a woman or whether it be just someone in society, whatever nationality, immigrant, that person has to be pushed down to make sure that your masculinity is intact. That's not masculinity. There's nothing masculine about that. That is pure 100% insecurity. And I think that the test that we can actually offer here is right out of Mark 10, where masculinity is the opposite of cruelty. Masculinity is serving others. Masculinity is following the person. Masculinity is actually taking up the cross. Masculinity is following Jesus to the cross. That's what masculinity is about. Not the opposite of softness, not the opposite of gentleness. Masculinity is not the opposite of tears or tenderness or being moved from in the heart. Masculinity is the opposite of cruelty. Cruelty is the use of power to make somebody smaller in order to make you bigger. I think Michelle Obama said something about that here recently, that a person's manhood shouldn't be based on downplaying another woman. That's just insane. That's insane cruelty. And by that measure, the cruelest men I've ever known are rarely the most masculine. And so they're usually afraid, and you see that in them. You see it in their words. It's something about them. Their identity is built in this, like for a man, this patriarchal hierarchy where they have to be on top and somebody has to be on the bottom. And so they are constantly managing that hierarchy and making sure that they're on top while someone else is on bottom. And that's the opposite of what Jesus called us to do in loving our neighbor. So Jesus did not build a hierarchy. He washed feet. If you don't know that, he washed feet. He touched lepers where everyone quarantined them. He picked people up off the floor, off the ground, helped them to walk again. He dignified people in his culture in deciding to Instead of putting them beneath, he helped them to rise. And so I want my masculinity to mirror that. There's no warrior Jesus in that. There's no gun-toting Jesus in that. There is service Jesus. And the trade is because the problem that we face is men find it very comfortable in our society when somebody is beneath them. That's a very comfortable state of being in our culture, where there's an enemy, when there is a villain, when there is somebody beneath, right? That could be whoever that is this week. It's like the enemy this week, it seems like, in our society. And it's very comfortable to live when somebody is beneath you. That's a control issue. That's a manipulative issue. That's a comfortability issue, because men have been raised to in that script. But the trade is to live in the uncomfortability of equality. The uncomfortability of equality means that everyone is on the same playing field. You're seeing now eye to eye. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a part. Everyone is at the table. The Pharisees had a big problem when Jesus did this, where he put notorious sinners around the table, helped them to rise, put them on the same plane. That's the trade. I think it's a better trade, but I'll say it more plainly, is thinking about Pride Month. Is a gay man living honestly in our society is not evidence that masculinity is collapsing. Masculinity is collapsing because our fists and our words humiliate other people in ultimate cruelty. So our masculinity is collapsing because of cruelty, nothing else. And so that's a big problem that I think sounding the alarm in our society. When I look reels after reels like you do, and I'm doom scrolling through my social media, and I'm seeing absolute cruel fodder, whether it be some pastor at some event speaking some toxic form of cruelty, that it's just as mind-boggling that somebody that's a Christian that actually proclaims Jesus as Lord can then in the next breath downplay and make fun of a leading woman in our society. That is insanity to me, that would be seen as a Christian environment, that would be seen as a Christian idea. That is just absolutely wrong. And we think that, oh, that person was just being funny, that person was just making a joke. After a while, you're like, okay, funny once, maybe. Not even funny once, but okay, grace, I'll give it funny once. But this has been going on now for decades in our society, where we are publicly proclaiming Jesus, and then in the next breath, we are downplaying a people. Whether that be a black person, whether that be a gay person, whether that be an immigrant person, whether that be a woman, we are literally downplaying, marginalizing, oppressing, and speaking ultimate cruelty in the same breath as Jesus is Lord. I wonder, I just sit there, I mean, that is going to be like, I don't want to be in that room when that discussion happens with Jesus. I do not want to be in that room. I just want to let Jesus handle that conversation between Jesus and that kind of attitude, because cruelty is the opposite posture of what Jesus wants us to be. And so a man who has dignity, the man who is secure, and the man who actually is showing up and is masculine is the man that gives surplus value, leaving the room, the people, the environment, the ideas, the situation better, more affirmed, uplifted, lifted, and supported and carried better than they found it. That's the assignment that we've been given. So what do we do with this? Because I think that, okay, I just gave a diagnosis. Okay, we got a problem. And I think just keeping it at the diagnostic level is probably it's okay, but I think we need a calling. And men in our community here in this city, church community, church family, our extended family, our extended circle are starving. Young men are starving for what I just described, is for other men to be a surplus value in their life. I think that the wrong people are getting the loudest voices online. And we need to be louder voices. We are in competition with young men in our society with devices in their hands. And we need to start speaking truth into their lives. And speaking truth means that we are honest and vulnerable and caring to the people in our lives. So the loudest voices are offering certainty, they're offering hierarchy, they're offering someone to blame. What young men need in our society is presence. They need people to show up in their lives, to pick up the phone, not to perform for them, but to say, I don't have it all figured out either, but I am here and I'm willing to walk alongside with you. So if you are, let's pick an age. If you are over 35, let's say your prefrontal cortex is finally developed in your brain, and and you have got your hormones under control, and you've gone through your drinking binges and finally found a sense of moderation or sobriety, right? So now you're in your 30s, and we now have just kind of landed that roller coaster plane. Here's a direct assignment, not a vague suggestion. This is a direct assignment. Find someone in your life, a young man that you can invest in tangible ways. Coach something. Just become a coach. Show up for something, someone. Pick a single mom and go buy this season some birthday and Christmas presents and just give it, right? Just offer real answers to questions that they have, which means you have to be present in their lives. You don't need a curriculum. You don't need any book. You need just consistency, and you need honesty. And let's not be afraid of that. I mean, I know in society there's a fear of mentorship right now because of accusations and things like that. Let's just be very public. Let's be out in the open about it. Let's meet in open places. Let's be very honest and very not gaining attention, but just being loud of intention in our assignment there. I think that we need to find people to invest in. We need to find people to talk to, and that might just be in a public coaching set, volunteering, just being the water guy. Just do something, right? Showing up in people's lives so that you can have potentially the chance of formative conversations. Some of the most important people in my life, important men, have been people that are not my family, people that are broader, that weren't related to me at all. My family has been very formative to me, but also the ones that maybe possibly were most formative later on were outside of my relatives. They kept showing up in my life. They spoke very concentrated truths. They never made someone else feel small so that they felt bigger. They didn't feel taller because that person was smaller. All right, so I say this often, and I want to say it again because this whole sermon, Jesus didn't die so that you didn't have to, so you don't have to. Jesus died so that you would know how to live and die. And he showed you exactly what a man with power in the universe does with it. And he gives it away as a ransom for many. He provides, he protects, he gives it away in generation. And he was a surplus value, never wanting to be repaid. And that's the assignment that we have, is to be a surplus value to others and to have that posture, which is the opposite of cruelty. If you find yourself and you have that inkling to be cruel, to make fun of, to downplay, and to marginalize other people, and if you think you need to fight against some cultural idea, I think you're in the wrong ring. You are in the wrong place, because there's so many other people that are out there that need your presence, and they need you to show up in their lives. And we're spending so much time over here in this fodder of cruelty. We need to step out of that and step into being a surplus value. Someone needs you to show up for them. And so that's our assignment today. So happy Father's Day. I hope that you learned something today and got something out of what I had to offer.